company was founded in 1873 when a multinational consortium of investors purchased a mine complex on the Rio Tinto River in Huelva, Spain, from the Spanish government. Rio Tinto is merely Spanish for Red River, and of course the river was so red because of iron ore that was in the dirt in around that area. It made the river red from the iron ore inside of the dirt under the water. And since then, the company has grown through a long series of mergers and acquisitions. 1873, Rio Tinto was founded. Since then, of course, mergers and acquisitions. If you can imagine, a great source of iron ore, steel, snapped up in a quick hurry and kept as a very, very good company to have around, especially if, say, you wanted to wage war. So a long series of mergers and acquisitions placed itself among the world's leaders in uranium, coal, and, yes, diamonds, aluminum, iron ore, copper, a lot of commodities. But they pretty much focus on extraction of minerals. Rio Tinto also has significant operations in refining, particularly for refining bauxite and iron ore. The company has operations in all 6 inhabited continents in the world, and its main concentration is in Australia and here in Canada, and owns gross assets valued at over $81 billion through a complex of wholly and partially owned subsidiaries. Since antiquity, it seems, got to go back a long way. A site along the Rio Tinto in the Andalusian province of Huelva in Spain has been mined for copper, silver, gold, and other minerals. Approximately 3000 BC, Iberians and Tartessians began mining the site, followed by the Phoenicians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Visigoths, and the Moors. And after a period of abandonment, the mines were rediscovered in 1556, and the Spanish government began operating them once again in the year 1724. Rio Tinto has been around a long time, one of the biggest iron ore companies in the world. Rio Tinto's investment in Rhodesian copper mines did a lot to support the company through troubled times in its Spanish Rio Tinto world of the Spanish Civil War. It helped them through the Second World War also. On February 1st, 2009, Rio Tinto management announced that they were in talks to receive a substantial equity infusion from Chinalco, a major Chinese state-controlled mining company, in exchange for ownership interest in certain assets and bonds. Chinalco, by the way, is already a major shareholder in Rio Tinto, having bought up 9% of the company's ownership in a surprise move last year. The Chinese are hungry for iron ore, hungry for aluminum. The proposed investment structure reportedly involved $12.3 billion for the purchase and ownership interests of Rio Tinto assets in its iron ore, copper, and aluminum operations only, because that's the only thing Chinalco, the major Chinese state-controlled mining enterprise, wanted out of Rio Tinto, was just those companies, the iron ore, copper, and aluminum. You see, Rio Tinto is broken into 6 operational businesses divided by product type. There's Rio Tinto Copper, and they're into just copper and byproducts like gold and silver. Then there's sulfuric acid, future home of nickel operations have developed. Rio Tinto Alcan is the aluminum subsidiary of it. Rio Tinto Energy is coal and uranium. Rio Tinto Diamonds is, of course, diamonds. And Rio Tinto Minerals is, of course, industrial minerals like borax, talc, salt, and gypsum. And Rio Tinto Iron and Titanium, of course, the one the Chinese wanted, iron ore, iron, and titanium dioxide. All the Chinese wanted was the iron ore and aluminum components. Translation? Army vehicles and aircraft. Aluminum for the aircraft, iron ore for the armored vehicles. But you'll never guess what happened yesterday. Yes, Friday. Yesterday. The Chinalco deal with Rio Tinto fell through. This is about 4 days after the plane crash. And instead, the debt-plagued company Rio Tinto did not take more U.S. Treasury bonds, which is America's debt from Chinalco, or the Chinese consortium. They instead signed a deal with the other British giant Australian-controlled mining company, BHP Billiton, which is the largest mining company in the world. And you just heard me say it. Owned by the Brits and the Aussies. Oh, by the way, Rio Tinto is also owned by the British. Space, back with more in just a moment. On AM 640.
The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640. The ancient mystery religions, numerology, the Holy Grail decoded, and he goes deeper than a black hole into today's headlines. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
I'm the guy they call Space. It's View from Space on AM 640. You can email me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. I'm just talking about the company Rio Tinto, how old it is, how far it goes back, and back to the ancient Phoenicians that were digging up iron ore in those days in Spain. Rio Tinto, of course, meaning Red River, and the river ran red simply because of the iron ore deposits that were in the earth around that river. DB in Hamilton writes, a steel town was a steel town. As you know, the city of Hamilton is, or at least was, a major steel producer in Canada. There are two major steel companies, one called U.S. Steel, was known as Stelco before the Americans bought it, and Dofasco before ArcelorMittal bought them. They're owned by Americans and Indians. Stelco is currently idle. Do you see them moving to China to help process their steel? D in Hamilton. And I say no, not in a million years. The problem is, we're not going to be allowed to make steel. That's why they're shutting you down. The idea is to have only a few places in the world that make steel so that you can limit who has it, who can build the armies. Because you see, that's when you go to war, how you pick the loser from the winner. The winner is always given the best equipment and the most incredible weaponry. So just this week, as the Chinese have been running around the world buying up all kinds of iron ore, anything they get their hands on, that's what they were doing in Brazil. That's why 6 of their executives died on that flight. They would not stop. They would not cease in using American debt to buy up all of these steel companies for basically paper, worthless paper. And the other side, the Brotherhood of the Snake, wouldn't stand for it. And they were about to increase their holdings in Rio Tinto. But on Friday, just a few days after the plane crash, the Chinalco deal fell through. And instead, the debt-plagued company Rio Tinto, a British-controlled company, closed a deal with the other British-Australian giant mining company, BHP Billiton, which is the largest mining company in the world, by the way, owned by the Brits and Aussies.